The topic of the lecture session has already been brought up in some way. How to make balance between regulations and innovations. What are the principles? Let's move to the final session, Regulating Big Tech. We will welcome moderator Mr. Cha Kim Huat. He's an experienced lawyer in corporate and transactional practice, regional head from Raj and Tam. We also have distinguished speakers for this panel, Mr. Vincent Noy from MAS, Professor Gu Qingyang from NUS, and Mr. Chen Hao from Huawei. Welcome to the stage.
Hello. Good afternoon and welcome to this final panel discussion. We are delighted to see there are still so many of you here, as well as those online as well. You know, the benefit of speaking last is that you know those people are here just to listen to you. Because there's no dinner and drinks after this because of COVID, right? So you have their attention. And this panel's topic actually is called Restructuring Big Tech, and it is an important one, given that we are progressing into the fourth industrial revolution and marching into the digital economy. Technological innovations have often been associated with the free spirit and free market. After all, it's about developing something new or making a change to existing products, services, or ideas. So, is it wise to regulate them? So for the longest time, most governments actually have adopted a high degree of tolerance towards tech companies, allowing them to explore and venture into new frontiers, challenging existing barriers, and disrupting even current business models. The logic for such tolerance is that new innovations will bring about better products, higher quality services, and more efficient business models. However, I would like to share with you 3 recent observations that have stimulated discussions on the need to regulate big tech. First is about data. Data, as we all know, is the lifeblood of the new world economy. Many things these days are powered by data. Motor car is no longer just a mechanical device, but relies on chips to power it. Autonomous vehicles rely on data to navigate and transport people and products from place to place. And even our food chain is now powered and delivered through data. And the second point is what I call O to O to O. That means offline to online to offline again. Because many tech companies are now not confined to providing tech solutions. They are into consumer services, they are into traditional industries such as banking, logistics, education, many of which are regulated industries in the traditional offline space. And the last observation is about the fourth industrial revolution. Big techs are now looking at robots and smart cities. And these are not what we see in the Tom Cruise sci-fi films, you know. These are actual realities. As such, there's a need to watch out for what we call monopolistic behavior that may exacerbate inequality issues. Regulation is therefore needed to protect the legitimate interests of businesses and the community. We have assembled today a very distinguished panel, and let me do a quick intro. Starting from my extreme left, we have Vincent Loy, Assistant Managing Director of MAS. Some of you may not know, MAS means Monetary Authority of Singapore, our central bank. So be careful of what we say, yeah? And next to Vincent, we have Professor Gu Qingyang. He's the Associate Professor from Lee Kuan Yew School of Public Policy, NUS. And next to me is Chen Hao, the Executive Vice President of Huawei International. And since we are talking about regulating big tech, it's about the public policy behind regulations. May I invite maybe Prof. Gu to start this session? by sharing with us what do you think are the public policy considerations behind regulations, especially regulating big tech? I think it's just turn on, you can just speak into the mic.
Hello. Okay. Thank you very much for your question. I think just now you described a very bright situation for our current world. It's true, right now there's a lot of new technology, especially digital technology, bring us a different world. So change our working place and also our lifestyle. So from the digital technology perspective, we enjoy so many convenience, and our welfare also improved very much. But on another side, a lot of concern come out. Okay, from the public policy perspective, I would like to highlight, I think, from maybe 2 or 3 aspects. The first one, I think, is from the concern of a consumer. So I think the consumer's concern is regarding how to protect their privacy, especially data privacy. So there's a problem for them when they share their data be collected and also be used. But whether this data be used in the right way and respect their privacy, I think this is we need to address this challenge, this new challenge. The second issue, I think, is from the potential market competitors. Because this is a digital technology firm, so they have the nature of a natural monopoly. It's a kind of a winner-take-all, business model. Okay, so the existing technology giant rely on their monopolist power, to erect the barriers for the new market, potentially the competitors. So how to make them competitive environment, that's very important. To create a fair competitive environment, very important. Because we hope there's a innovation. We encourage the innovation. But if there's a monopolistic power, so the innovation will be discouraged. So how to regulate the market, okay? And I think this is an issue from the potential market players. So from the government point of view, I think we can observe our world, the digital firm, they normally consider their own business model. Okay? It's true, they are rapidly developed, but how this kind of a new technology can contribute to the national economy and the national development. I think this is a concern from the government, national government, also the local government, for example. So how can we make this application of a digital economy become more inclusive? I think there's 2 types of industry. One is a high-tech industry. Another one is traditional, industry, especially MNCs, small and medium-sized enterprises. And how can we make this kind of new technology become a new engine for the national economic growth? For this traditional industry, apply this new technology and to promote their upgrading and become high quality, the business enterprises. I think this is the issue. So I just want to highlight the 3 aspects: concerns from consumer and the competitive, potential competitors, and also the government from the overall picture.
Thank you, Prof, for your contributions. I totally agree with the 3 points raised by you. I'll come back to you later on the inclusive development and how it integrates with the traditional industry, because I think that itself is a very rich topic. I myself have been the consumer, right, recently of a healthcare service providers. 2 days ago, I received an SMS to say that there's been a data breach. Your data may have been compromised, but no worry, no financial information was disclosed. So we are not just talking about data privacy, we're also talking about data security issues, right? So with that, let me move over to the regulator, Vincent. We all know that the innovators always say, please don't limit, my imagination, because that's how we innovate. But from a regulator's point of view, there's a challenge of striking the right balance. So once you've decided to regulate a particular sector or industry, what goes through your mind? As in how to achieve that balance, how to regulate so that it's not too little, not too much.
So, thank you very much, and very good to see every one of you at about 4:30 today, this afternoon. Before I answer your question, maybe let me put a few pointers out there. For MAS, we strongly believe in digitization and innovation. We believe that innovation is the lifeblood of financial services, and the financial services sector will thrive and be successful based on innovation. Second point is that we also believe that innovation has to come out from the ground, because we need the whole ecosystem to innovate. Having said that, we also strongly believe that innovation and regulation can work hand in hand. It is not in conflict. What is important is that innovation needs to work together with regulation hand in hand. And it is also very important for regulation not to front-run innovation. The moment where regulation front-run innovation, that's where it will stop the financial services sector from growing. But having said that, there is no doubt that there will be risks in everything we do, including innovation. And the way to deal with innovation is to make sure we understand the innovation. And understanding the innovation means that the regulator needs to work with the innovator, understand how it is done, and a lot of time it is very complex, and it takes a lot of time for the regulator to understand the innovation, and then ask ourselves in terms of what's the impact to the market, the consumer, and the stability of the financial services sector. And to do that, you need it to be proportionate and need to be fair as well. And we are also very, very clear that regulation has to be modular and agile. What it means is modular is basically that it should be based on the risks that we are talking about and based on how big the risk is. If the risk is small or something that we can absorb, we are willing to accept some failure along the way. I think that is the fact of innovation. But when it comes to a part where it has a big impact on the society, on the consumer, on the stability of the financial services sector, we need to step in before it has a major impact. Does it answer your question?
Yes, it does. In fact, there were so many gems in there that I definitely would want to come back to you later. I love the risk-based approach that you're adopting, because innovation means that you will not always succeed. I remember a PE fund ever told me, when they meet to compare success, it's not about how many companies you exited with 20x or 30x. You'll be surprised, right? Do you think that's what they look for? No, they asked each other, how many companies you invested last year went bankrupt? Then I was puzzled as a lawyer. You are looking for success, right? Not failure. Then the guy said, why do I look at that? Because if every company I invest in turn out to be profitable, to be successful, means I'm not taking enough risk. I would not have invested in Facebook. What such stupid university chat group, right? How can they make money? You will not have invested in those things which you will just brush it off, right? It's not your mandate. And they look at that because of the risk they are taking, maybe 9 out of 10 companies they invested in fail, but the single one that they succeed in is going to be the unicorn, the decathlon that is going to deliver the entire portfolio. So I like the part about the risk-based approach, and I definitely want to come back to you on that. So maybe just let me go around to get views from each person first before we come to discuss some common issues. I want to then come to Cheng Hao, because I like what Vincent mentioned about innovation and regulation are not conflicting. A lot of people think that with the topic regulating big tech wouldn't want to be regulated. But I can tell you it's the exact opposite, based on my experience. Why? Because the biggest risk for big tech is because they are not regulated. They know that if they are not regulated, they will never be able to go so far or go so big, because regulation will come one day. So they hope to be regulated earlier. Because once you are regulated, you can tick the box. You want 3 things, right? I've done 3 things, so don't come after me, right? With regulation, it promotes certainty. With certainty, they can expand their business faster, and they can manage their risk better. And moreover, with regulation, it can weed out those unregulated smaller players, right, who can't comply with the regulations. So the entry to barrier is higher. So actually, big tech loves to be regulated. So with that context, let me come to Cheng Hao, which is actually from Huawei. So we know that we spoke about, just now I mentioned about, my own personal data breach experience, right? How does Huawei, right, which we know you are very strong in equipment, cloud-based technology, how do you actually help tech companies, to comply with their regulations, including, as Prof say, data privacy, data security type of issues? Over to you.
Okay, I think, first of all, thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak here, like 4:45 p.m. I think this is one of the few chances I can speak in front of the public without mask. Really appreciate. And yeah, I think Huawei as a global ICT infrastructure provider, what our main our vision is bring the digital to every country, organization, and families, right? So basically, we provide ICT infrastructure and smart devices. So in terms of, I wouldn't say we are able to enable, help them to comply with regulatory, but I think digital infrastructure play a very important role in this topic. So to achieve the regulatory objective, because you mentioned a lot of cybercrime, data breaches, right? Yeah, for sure. In recent years, I think new technologies like 5G, IoT, cloud computing, and AI, those things have changed people's lives, like bring huge social and economic benefits. But however, every coin have 2 sides. There's something come along with it, right? I think maybe more cyber attack, more data being processed, so there's a higher risk in terms of leakage. So this is something we should be overcoming, but not be an excuse for us to stop. So I think to answer this question, I think first one, we need a very robust and secure digital infrastructure. So how to achieve that? I don't think this is a 100% technology issue. It's a very comprehensive. You must look into a very comprehensive way. So let's take Huawei for instance. First, I think is strategy and governance, right? Like our founder, Mr. Ren Fei, always said, place a company's responsibility for safeguarding our customers' cybersecurity and the business over our own business commercial interests. So in company strategy and the governance level, I think priority should be given to security, especially in high-tech companies. Although just mentioned it's not 100% about technology, but R&D is also very important, right? Your companies need to be demonstrate a long-term commitment in terms of R&D to enhance their approach to accommodate appropriate cybersecurity design, develop, and deployment. So as well investing into next generation of products. So after that, what happened? You should have a very systematic verification process. In Huawei, we have 3 phases. So we say assume nothing, believe no one, and check everything. although you invest a lot in R&D, sometimes people are being under pressure. You need release products, right? So people will be rushing doing things maybe without proper right testing, you release products. So having a multi-layer independent verification definitely will help on that. I think next, is about how to manage your supply chain. You can never build a whole system by yourself. In this in current world, it's not possible. So if third parties technology process have secure weakness, it definitely infect your solution and products, right? So the last mile, I would say was delivering and the service security is very important. We want to make sure your operation, your maintenance are secure with including proper upgrades, proper fault fixing, so expecting a security throughout the life of these products. So last point I want to mention about this is people also matters. So people may be the most valuable asset for a company, but in terms of security, could be the greater weakness as well. So I think every company should promote awareness of those people's, in terms of security, promote awareness and also enhance their capabilities. So that's why we want to share about how to build a robust digital infrastructure to help to reduce those cybercrime, data leakage in a digital era. But last time I mentioned, I do believe digital infrastructure, all those technology, can help regulators to embark the journey of digital transformation. Usage of tools, right? Improve the operational efficiency, make a fast decision, right? I think digitalization definitely will helping achieve the regulatory goals. Yeah.
Thank you, Cheng Hao. I think there's one word that rang very loudly when you say it throughout. It's security, security, security. Everything you do from what I call the system to the processes to the people is all about security. So therefore, we all know that in the virtual world, security is the premium. That price above everything else. On that, let me just move slightly to deeper into what I call the regulation. And for this next question, I want maybe Vincent and Prof to give us some insights. Because I think Vincent mentioned about when you come to regulations, you always talk with the industry. Because regulators may not know best, because you're not in the forefront of it. You need to understand from the industry input, then you decide how best to regulate it. And I think Prof mentioned earlier about how does one integrate between the traditional business and the digital business. So my first question on this topic is maybe Vincent, do you think there ought to be different set of rules for the traditional business and the online business? And for that, I would just say maybe using banking as an example. We know that you have a set of rules for the traditional banks, and you have a different set of rules for the so-called digital banks. And then at some point in time, we know the traditional banks also have digital offering, and we know that at some point in time, the digital banks down the road may also get involved into offline transactions. So do you think it should be different or the same?
So Kim Huat, let me, you are partly right, but not totally right, okay?
That's what all lawyers always are, you know, because then we can argue on both sides. Either it's right or wrong, we can argue from both sides, yes.
So the reason why I say you are partly right is that for MAS, if it is the same risk, we actually regulate the same way. Okay, very important. Whatever the traditional bank has to comply with in terms of technology risk, inside our technology risk management, the digital bank has to comply as well. Having said that, there is also proportionality and materiality. If they are small, they wouldn't have all the bells and whistles that is required. But doesn't mean that they don't need to address the risk. Okay, that's very important. Having said that, the digital bank, they are doing something that are very new, and probably they have some risk, because they are going to a business model that is still new to the world or to Singapore. And then we have to protect, as a regulator, our citizen, consumer, and also the integrity of the financial services sector. And that's where we have actually put in some rules in terms of how much deposit can they take, how much capital they need to have, which is different from a traditional bank, which is tried and tested. But as much as possible, if it's the same risk, we should do it the same because we want the competition to be fair and balanced. Is it?
Yeah. So speaking like what I call a true regulator. So Chinese call it 一视同仁. Same risk, we treat you all the same. But notwithstanding that, we also have a calibrated approach, right? Whether you're a man or a child, we'll treat you differently, right? Because children tend to run around more and fall down more often compared to an adult. So you must treat them differently. So I think that is probably the right approach. It's not a one-size-fits-all. And on that, I actually want to come to Prof. Gu, right? Because we are talking about now having traditional business model plus online business model. And many times I've come across this term, and for those tech companies there, my apologies for presenting it that manner. But people tells me that tech companies are just aggregators. They don't contribute to the true economy. The one that do all this, what I call transportation services, they are not the driver. They are living off the drivers. The one that do the food delivery don't deliver nor cook the food. They are living off those who cook and deliver the food. So what do they contribute to the real economy? So, Prof, what do you think?
I think this is a very essential issue. So, firstly, I want to add one point for the relationship between regulation and innovation. I think Vincent's point, I fully agree. So there is a balance between regulation and innovation. And I think the ultimate objective is for encourage the economic development. Okay, even we set some regulation rules, the final purpose is for the development. So return to your question, I think right is true. For the digital technology firm, they face the situation is quite different with the traditional firms. For the traditional industry, their major challenge is how to catch up by using these high-tech technologies. I think from the public policy point of view, we need to provide more support for this kind of a traditional industry. Otherwise, they cannot be catch up. It's not a kind of inclusiveness, you know, the prosperity. In China, there's a lot of emphasis on common prosperity, and that's a very key issue. And I think our current regulation framework was created in the last century, based on the traditional economy. But right now, the situation is very complicated. I cannot think about that situation means a one-size-fits-all. Maybe we can, for the purpose of encouraging innovation and the real economy development, as you mentioned, that's a very important issue. We need to have a certain kind of flexibility for implementing government rules or government policies to make our whole economy to grow up faster and the economic growth go faster.
So I would say that at some point in time, you probably need to integrate the two, right? The offline to the online, because the lines would blur. And actually what you just said actually echoes the theme of today's talk, right? What we call building a community of shared future. So whether you're online or online player, we all share the same future, and we should come together. With that, maybe let me move to Cheng Hao. You know, I think Vincent mentioned when it comes to regulations, right? We should work with the industry. So when it comes to cybersecurity, obviously the regulators want to make sure that the data is safe and the data may be localized, and if it's transferred for what purpose, you want some clear rules on those things. I'm just thinking whether from the industry experience, right? You have footprints in many countries. Do you see the industry players being able to work with regulators to say that this is the best practice based on our global experience, and with this sort of setup, it could prevent cybersecurity issues and that sort of stuff. Would you be able to add some light on those things?
Okay, I'll try to share a little bit on this. I would say there's no, of course, Huawei operation in 170 plus countries. We have a lot of experience globally, but actually different countries have different situations, right? So generally, I think we work very closely with regulators. As you mentioned just now, very good point. Actually, tech companies sometimes actually we're not opposed to regulation. Right? We welcome reasonable regulation with clear rules because today's world is full of uncertainty. Right? If there's a regulation there, give out directions. Right? Business needs some certainty rules of the system to point out our right directions. So we have been working quite closely with the regulator in each countries, and maybe we can take GDPR as an example, right? So years back, I think data governance has been overlooked in many places, but the European Union, I think in contrast, have been a trailblazer to make the first leap forward in this area. So after GDPR, I think we have there's a lot of benefits. So we not only allow the international information self-determination, but also provide some remedies if you have any wrong individual privacy have been undermined. Right? So we have multilateral consensus-based rules to follow and get you what to do. So which makes things more effectively. So I think I saw many countries after that have come out with similar regulation or laws after that. So I think as a tech company, we are still continue working with all the regulators in different countries to make sure to contribute to this part. Yeah.
Thanks, Chen Hao. Later on, we're going to have a Q&A session. Yeah. So before I open the floor, please think about your questions. In a short while, I'll come back to you. Because I think Chen Hao mentioned about multilateralism, I want to come back to Vincent. Several months ago, I heard Minister Chan Chun Sing mention about the Digital Economy Agreement. It's similar to the FTA because that is the way to go. And he mentioned about the new generation of Digital Economy Agreement, whereby it can help to facilitate data and financial connectivity. We all don't know what it is yet, and we would like to see whether there are any aspects that you could share with us. May not the details, but at least tell us what we should be looking for in such new form of digital economy agreement, and what you think could be the challenges in trying to harmonize, as what Chen Hao said, many countries do things differently.
Okay, there are two parts to your question. One is about digital agreement, and secondly, what are the challenges? Okay, the first one in regards to digital agreement. The reason why we need that is that the world is interconnected, especially in financial services. There is no way Singapore can operate by itself and also the rest of the world. We are all very interconnected in terms of payment system, in terms of the flow of the transaction. And because of that, data is the lifeblood of financial services. Actually, there is a need to actually have more data so that they can potentially increase their business. Because once you have data of another country, you can potentially think about, because people travel around the world. And when you have data of your customer around the world, you understand your customer better, and hopefully you can provide better services to your customer. We are talking about global company. They are all over the world. They don't just operate in Singapore alone. That's one. Okay, so it's important to have digital agreement to make sure that country agree in terms of how you share data. And that sharing of data will increase profitability and also in terms of making the process more efficient. There is also a bigger part in terms of there is always a risk of financial crime. That is AML, which is anti-money laundering. And actually the criminals are smarter than us. They are hiding somewhere in the rest of the world, not in Singapore. Maybe some of them are in Singapore, I don't know. But isn't it great if you can have all this data so that everybody knows who are those criminals and people can do the analysis with all those data, and then they can deal with the criminal on a holistic and international way. Okay? Thirdly, managing risk. When your customer default in another country, wouldn't it be great to know about all this illegal transaction or all this default about your customer and actually allow the company to manage risk? So there is actually a lot of benefit in terms of digital agreement. Okay, now coming back to your second question in terms of what are the challenges. There is legitimate concern that a lot of countries are deciding that data are national assets and there is national security concern and you need to protect them. I personally think, and some people actually describe data as the new oil. And I thought that that was not, personally, I don't think that is, I would reflect data as the new oil. Because when you talk about oil, somebody use it, another person cannot use. And then people fight for it. I look at data as a new oxygen. Okay, you want to make sure that everybody contribute to it. You can make something bad out of CO2, but you can make something good about it. But you can recycle it all the time. Okay, and I think the more you recycle, the more you use, you actually make it richer. Okay, and that's the way we look at it. But there are legitimate concerns that we need to deal with. To deal with, we need international agreement, international understanding the norm within the country, and we need to work within that boundary. Thank you.
Thanks, Vincent. I heard so many synonyms with data. This morning we heard that data is the new gold. Then I heard from Vincent, it's the new oxygen, whereas some others call it the new oil. So data is everything, right? Data is powerful. With that, I've got a couple more questions, but I want to give you all the chance because we may be running out of time shortly. Do you all have any questions that you want to ask our panelists? Yes, the gentleman behind. Appreciate if you just say your name, your company, brief, not to talk much about, but your name, your company, so that we know where you come from, and your question.
Hi, my name is Bertrand. I'm with Sizing Media. So my question is to do with what Mr. Lloyd, what you said about the cross-border data flows. You talk a lot about agreements and between countries. I wanted to find out more a bit about what kind of guidelines that countries can work out in terms of coming to an agreement in terms of cross-border data flows and how to indict people, how to get responsibility. So can you give us a little bit of a breakdown on that, please?
Yes, Vincent, and obviously the other panelists, if you want to contribute to that point, that's possible.
Okay, I'm going to try to attempt to do that. And actually, it's a very good question because actually we started within Singapore. Within ABS, which is the Association of Banks, they have come out with a data sharing handbook, which is probably one of the first in the, among the world. And that is sharing of data within the ecosystem in Singapore and overseas. And the reason is that in order to share data, as you correct or alluded, it is not so easy. There is, in terms of responsibility, when you hold data, and basically you need to agree in terms of the role and responsibility, the legal obligation, the rules and regulation of the lay of the land, and also in terms of what are the security that is expected in regards to security. And also in terms of actually, if you want to go even further, in terms of the format of the data as well. Data is extremely complicated, and I think that this is a journey. Within Singapore, the handbook have come up with very elementary consideration in regards to data. And I think that that can be replicated across the world. And then if you stretch it even further, you talk about ingestion or collection of data, then you also need to talk about responsibility and the consequences of the data and who is going to be mandating or actioning this those action. So there are many things that we need to go, but I don't think we can deal everything in one shot. We probably need to do it agile basis, incrementally, because sharing of data requires trust. And trust can only be built, cannot be mandated. And that has to be done slowly, incrementally, start with the basic, and slowly you move up. Thank you.
Thanks. Since Vincent mentioned about law, I think I felt compelled to add my 2 cents worth. So I think sharing of raw data is where most countries have concerns. But you could consider sharing the derivative of data. And what do I mean by that? And I've heard people mention that before, which I thought is very powerful. If I now want to lend money to this person, I don't know whether this person can pay me. The traditional method is I look at his default history, whether he has been paying his debt, mortgages, all that stuff. But there is a person who defaulted before in paying the mortgage loan and everything else. But I will still lend him. Why? Because I'm lending him for gaming, and through his behavioral pattern, the data I receive, I know that he always pays his gaming dues because he needs that to continue. He may not pay his mortgages, he may not pay his utilities. No, utilities, he doesn't pay water, he pays energy because he needs electricity to play his game. So I'm saying this behavioral data is useful because you know what people would pay, what people will pay slowly for other things, and what they will pay promptly, right? Otherwise they can't live. And that sort of data will be useful. But that sort of data doesn't mean you need to identify Mr. X does that or Mr. Y. It can be a derivative so that you know by and large this segment of the population, these people, they would do that. I can share with you a lot of derivative about my teenagers' children, what they like and what they don't like. But that's aside. On that, I saw a hand raised by an old friend, Wen Hui. Yes, please, question.
Okay, thank you. So my name is Wen Hui. I'm from Tencent FinTech, Asia Pacific. Well, just now when I heard Vincent mention about the data as oxygen, I think indeed it's a quite a fantastic idea. Because first of all, I feel that the data shouldn't be a privilege to certain people, but rather it should be a public resource, right, accessible to everyone. But on the other hand, just now you also mentioned, right, if it's oxygen, then it should be able to be recycled, right, and may need to be purified so that people can always use it. Then there's a cost associated. So that reminds me about one of the question, what would be the potential partnership or things between the public sector and the private sector can do together to handle this big topic. Of course, I think from MAS is a regulator view. I believe Professor Gu may have another view from the academic point of view, and our friend from Huawei definitely will give us some other ideas. Thank you.
Sounds like this is a question for all of you, and I love Wen Hui's point of view. Wen Hui, you'll be invited for my next panel, because I like the part about oxygen. Since you use the term oxygen, means oxygen must be available to all. It cannot be just to the privileged, right? So data, it should be open. The government should consider making some data public so that everybody gets to enjoy, and it must be recyclable, right? Sustainable. I like those concepts, but that's topic for the next panel, right? So next time. But
maybe I start first.
Yes,
Make it easier for me, okay?
Next time, after Vincent say, you all can say, I agree with what Vincent said. That's the easy answer. But no, yes, Vincent.
So while data is a new oxygen, we also need to be mindful about data privacy in terms of what you call personal identifying information. That you need to protect. That is important. And you can only provide that with the consent on the individual. But having said that, personally, I think that the government in Singapore are doing a lot in terms of data sharing. Okay, and I think you will see more things from the government in terms of, in fact, the government are sharing the data from SLA, which is Singapore Land Authority, in terms of the spatial data, and hoping, in fact, there is a lot of conversation, what other data can we share, such that the ecosystem will build technology to make life easier or better for the citizen. And that is, but I also think that can we do more? Yes, but even Singapore statistical, the STATS body, which is statistical, what do you call that?
The Statistical Bureau.
Yeah,
yes.
They actually issue a lot of data. If you go to their website, they have beautiful data analytics. And there are a lot of data that we can use. It is that, do you actually know that they have all those data? Okay, within MAS, within our website, we also have a lot of data. Okay, but I think there is increasing need to see whether we need a platform to bring them together like an aggregator. We have done it for fintech because fintech is everywhere. We have come up with an aggregator that adds on all the information in terms of fintech, and hopefully the whole ecosystem will go there and pick the data that's required and make life easier for them. So actually there is a process in place. But it would be great if we work with all the, as much as possible, the ecosystem to make sure that we can do even more. Thank you.
Thank you, Vincent. Prof, over to you. The fact about data being made public, being shared, and how does the public collaborate with the private sector?
I think Wen Hui's point is great. I think now, in future, our world will rely more and more on the data flows across the border. And I agree fully with you. So whether we can treat the data as a public goods for our world, if we can really to share the data, share the asset in the world, I think our world will become prosperity. So I think the key issue is the global governance. We need coordination among the global world. And unfortunately, I observed the different picture. So now more and more people set more restrictions on the cross-border data flows. I think this is unfortunate, the phenomena. So this phenomena remind us we need to solve this problem by set up a global data governance system. I think that's the key issue. Maybe we have a WTO for the international trade. In future, we have a similar global organization for setting up this kind of a framework to make your dream come true.
And knowing Singapore, we are quite likely to take the lead with the new format of digital economy agreement, which will provide some blueprint for this so-called global-based multilateral data transfer trading system.
Can I add to that?
Yes, Vincent.
Since Prof talked about it, actually I think that sharing of data, as I've said, is about trust. And unfortunately, it's about politics at the end of the day. And I think in this world, unfortunately, we are living in this era where actually the world is much more splintered, more balkanized. As a result, people don't trust one another and make it more difficult. But we do not know what the world is going to be. But I think that for the world to progress, there needs to be data sharing, and data agreement might be the first step. And slowly, hopefully, it will permeate to other countries as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Vincent. Cheng Hao, anything to add?
I think Vincent and Professor Gu have shared very good points. I think just now, I just add my 2 cents. Just now we talk about data protection, data sharing. Actually, it's the same thing. It's actually how you collect, you process, store, use your data based on certain rules and standards, right? I think the important thing is the rule and standards, how we do this whole process. So it's actually the 2 sides of the one coin, right? So personally, I think organizations in this region can achieve win-win situation, cooperation under certain framework, like maybe RCEP or those things, right? Eventually, if there's a rules and standard agreed by multiple parties, there will be eventually improving our national, each country's digital economic competitiveness. Yeah.
Okay, so I think for data sharing, I just want to add that once data are being shared, other than what I call the governance issue, the other thing is we need somebody to sanitize and check the data. Because I can tell you, in the online world, you can't believe whatever people tell you or whatever statistics they put in front of you, right? Because they may be out there to achieve certain purpose. I would not say whatever apps, but there was just this famous app which put up this top restaurant, and it's the top restaurant for several weeks. Actually, the restaurants didn't exist. All the reviews were given by ghostwriters. And then when you call the restaurant for reservation, they say, I'm fully booked for the next 1.5 years. So the consumer will think, fully booked for 1.5 years, so many people try to say very good, then it must be really good, right? But actually, the restaurants didn't exist. So you need to sanitize the data that you receive, and there ought to be some governance. Actually, sorry, time is running up. I actually have a lot more questions like crypto and other stuff. That means that Chai Sing need to invite all of you back for another day. But like all panel, I'll give you the chance to put in the last word. Regulating big tech. Maybe to help you out. More regulations, less regulations, or as is. Looks like Vincent is ready for a go. You start first.
I think the future of regulation is collaborative regulation. Regulation can only work if the whole ecosystem works with the regulator, because the regulator, let me tell you, we do not know everything. We need the regulatee to work with the regulator, and I think the future is collaborative regulation. Thank you.
So do not fear the regulators. If you have a problem, approach them. They will help you to solve it through regulations, not to punish you first, unless you didn't follow. So, Prof.
I think I hope there's a consultative regulatory framework. I hope this will be better, because the regulator cannot just set the rules from their own consideration, must consult the market player, and the audience, and also make the high-tech behavior consistent with the whole picture of the national development.
Thank you. So that's consultative and inclusive sort of regulations. Chen Hao, I give you the last word.
And thank you. So I think regulation, I think regulation with rules and standards can help tech companies. So tech companies should, I think, should proactively talk to regulators, and under the regulatory, or I think we should keep doing our innovation. Yeah.
Thank you. With that, ladies and gentlemen, can you please join me in thanking the last panel? And I also like to thank you for your patience and staying with us for the entire day. Give yourself a round of applause, please. Thank you.